Welcome to Systems of Existence, Robert. I don't even know where to start with all of the excitement and synchronicities with, yeah, just having you on, talking about everything that is happening. I feel like this year, specifically with Neptune moving into Aries, is very much you are going to be a firehouse of new information. The lost octave has to come back, right? And we really have to understand that we are so much more. And I love, it brings us to 72 hexagrams, which is a 9, and we are in a 9 year. We're ending the cycle of the age of Pisces, so to speak, where we release a lot of, old programming and beliefs, maybe even about our origin, our nature, all of these things, and how we understand reality, really. Because I mean, there's so much happening in the world. We have to question everything, and we also have a lot of new discoveries. I mean, when Uranus also moves into Gemini and everything, we will have so much newness. And you are obviously one of the people that are on the forefront of new research. You just recently had an amazing podcast with Robert Edward Grant. He's also been on the podcast here. And I mean, Egypt leads the way and guides us into, I guess the answers have always been there, but we haven't seen them. And then we have geniuses like you and Robert both Robert, that help us see them. And then, yeah, it's unlocked for the entire collective, which then creates a ripple effect in more and more and more. And so before we go into a tangent, because there's so much that we will talk about, I want you to introduce yourself in a way, and the research that you do, the magic that you do with the I Ching, with the lost octave and the 1314 zodiacs. I've gotten so many questions about it, and at first I was like, oh my gosh, but then I was like, okay, I need to go more into it, and now I'm like, no, I really understand that there's more to it. At first I felt a bit, well, then we have to question Egypt and everything, because, in the pyramids and everything, there's only 12 and everywhere is 12. But obviously now we have evidence that there's more. There's more.
Do. Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on, and so great to be in conversation with you. And yeah, there's so much to speak about. But all I can say is that, yeah, like as you were saying about what's always been, and it's now being revealed, and that's essentially why the book and this whole transmission was called the Lost Octave, because it's implying that it was always there. And so, my journey with all of the hexagrams and, human design, this type of thing was just purely on this Lion's Gate, which again is connected to Egypt. When the transmission came through, and I really remember that day very vividly, and it was just this urge to look at Ra's rave mandala. And I'd sort of seen it before, but not really in depth. And I'd heard about human design, but I'd not really studied any of that. But as soon as I looked at the map, I always say that Ra's like an engineer. So when you've got like another engineer, and I would say, like, in my bio, I say that I'm a cosmic architect of the mystical, because it's like mythology, but then there's also the science, the geometry, the maths, and kind of bringing it left and right brain. So when I looked at the map, then I was like, well, it feels like there's something missing here. I couldn't put my finger on it. Why 64? It kind of works in geometry in terms of a cube, but in terms of time, it doesn't really work out mathematically, because we have 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute. And so this idea of 60 is what I've come to realize, it's actually the threshold of the third dimension. So that's like the limitation in our experience. So with my work through sort of going into higher dimensional realms and the mathematics that works with that, I then started to apply, like, okay, what happens then in the next dimension? And that's when I found that the final four, so from 61 to 64, they actually live in the fourth dimension. So when I did that, and I laid out the map in what's known as a hypercube, essentially, which is like a cube is matter, and then a hypercube is then matter in space-time. So it brings it into a living, because we all know space-time. So it brings it into matter, into our living life. And so when I did that and I laid it out, and you'll see it in the book, there was a missing 8 gates, which is an octave. An 8 is an octave. And so that's when the title came, like it's the lost octave. And so then I linked it all to music. And then, of course, that shifted it from 64 to 72. And what was so beautiful about that is that 72 I knew was one of the highest teachings in sort of Hebrew mystery schools, the 72 names of God. So now all of a sudden, going up one dimension now starts to link the ancient I Ching with the ancient Jewish mysteries. And I thought, well, wow, this starts to feel like it's a level that brings everything into more of a unity. And then I started to, like a good scientist in a way, I started to try and disprove what I'd found. So I didn't just take the intuition, so I worked it out mathematically, through geometry, through quantum physics, through the DNA, through every single facet I knew, and it kept on saying the same result. And so then that's really what the book is in a way, is this exploration of like these what I call master stargates. And you can say that the lost octave in a way are the master gates of all the other gates. So for example, gate 65, which is in Leo, which was the first of the lost octave gates, you could actually say that that 65 is overlighting or rules the whole part of Leo. So in higher dimensions, what happens is that we have all these fractal parts, but then they start to group together until you get to the oneness in the higher dimensions. So it kind of makes sense, right? That there's this oneness and then it fractalizes into all of the gates. And so if you trace it back, it does the same thing. So the lost octave is like the next layer of the octave that allows everything to start to be grouped. And then that's when I started to pursue the Dendera stone with the Zodiac. And I wanted to bring back the ancient star lore of all of the stories of the stars. Because in astrology, and think we'll say like a transit is going through, this sign, and there's all of that side of astrology. But that's not really my love. My love is to find out the mythology, which really is our story. It's what we play out. And so if you have a certain hexagram, there's a certain constellation that's connected to that, that's different to the zodiac. And then that has its own mythology. And so now we can actually start to figure out like, what's my living myth I'm meant to be following? What are the trials that I'm meant to be experiencing? How do I move through that by understanding these stories? So yeah, it's kind of been an amazing journey to put that out. And then of course, when the book went out, I was just so pleased because I call it a divine feminine story. It's about Venus essentially, and it's a Venusian transmission. And yeah, it ended up being #1 in 10 countries around the world. And it's this book about the divine feminine and the star stories of astrology.
I love when I saw the Vitruvian Sophia, I was like, oh my gosh, I love that you did that, because it's just so, we obviously always think of the Vitruvian man, right? And obviously there's a lot of decoding in that image, but the Vitruvian Sophia, it just, looking at it feels really powerful. And, even when you were speaking, I could see, and exactly what you say, it's like I get like so many visuals about the DNA all the time, even working with astrology, the gene keys, because it's all just, this is a hologram we live in, and we see everything physically projected, so to speak, but it's all just a matter of fractals and geometry and DNA patterning in our cells, like literally. And so working with those gene keys, or these codons, it's really like how the DNA is restructuring itself in order to form an image or a projection in the outside world that then becomes our projection field. And if we dive deeper into the origin of it, also what's coded in my cells, so to speak, what imprint do I carry, what myth are my cells playing out, basically, and having an understanding of that's basically the idea that God had for my physicality to play out. then we can play the role that we came here to play, right? For ourselves, for our own myth, for our own lives, but ultimately really just for the divine to have an experience, right? To have a specific, let's just say, plot, right? And be the plot twist maybe for other people. And that's the symphony. And that's why I like to also work with the bees. We can talk about that, where it's like, okay, if we all would just play our part in the play, or take a music piece, for example, if we just would all listen to the conductor, then it would be a song of harmony, right? And a symphony. And that's also why I love to work with music and sound and harmony, because it merges the disharmony or disruption in the field into coherence, right? Into coherent stream of energy, of flow, of synergy. And I also think that that's what these pyramids and the chambers and everything were all about, to clear the disruptive patterns, or where we are off of our mythology, let's just say, and it realigns us with our myth. That's why when we are there, then all the synchronicities start coming up, or your life is being reshuffled. It's an initiation to reset you in a way, to bring you back home, or to bring you back to your original DNA, let's just say, which we can talk about, the maternal DNA that you were speaking about. So how is that connected to it? And I mean, one of my favorite things, it's my North Node gate 10, the void, which is ultimately where it all starts, right? The void is, I work a lot also with Joe Dispenza's work, and, reprogramming your cells and really coding the water in your body through the void, because we are all just a water cell, and understanding how the DNA works and how we can imprint with cymatics and sound the DNA field. Very connected to the void as well. And the void ultimately in the gene keys in human design is about self-love at the end of the day, being, right? Pure being. And how are we our essence, which is the hardest thing for every human to be, because it's not something you can do.
Yeah, no, it's so beautiful. There's so many things to share about it. I wrote in the book that the lost octave is what I call, it's a quantum term, and they're called error correction codes. And so, I love all of the modern science evolutions in our genetics, and also where we're going in the quantum field. And so when I looked at it as the quantum, I also could figure out that this was also like computer code. And so what people don't often realize is that when you send like a piece of data, like an email, it comes with the code that you've given it. But then there's also what they call these parity bits. And parity bits are like these add-ons that go onto that code, so that when it's received by another one, if that data is scrambled or corrupted, or they're static through that transference, then those error correction codes alter the code, shift it slightly so it reads exactly how it's meant to. So I figured out the lost octave was exactly the same process, is that now adding these codes in to the 72, and of course 72 times 6 gives us the 432, which is the natural harmonic frequency of Mother Earth. And so that's why I say everywhere I went, from computer science to quantum science to the natural harmonics, and then from that I managed to assign every musical note, all of the frequencies to every single gate, so that people can start to listen to the sound of their own birth chart. So
Wow.
yeah, it's like your birth chart is like this musical piece of that you can play, and if people are musicians, they can work with that. And so that was all tied in. I tied it all into the angelic beings from the Hebrew mystery schools. So you've got all the 72 angels, and then I connected it all to the Latin. So I learned Hebrew and Latin through this whole process as well. And in Latin, they had this whole thing, which was the 72 names of God as well, in their own way. So I compiled all of this and put it all in the book, so that there's so many different threads that people can work with this. And then going back to the void, and we'll speak about the maternal DNA more in gate 10. Well, what's interesting is because they work in what I call super partners, which is again a quantum term. And in the void in the Tropic of Capricorn, in its opposite sign in the Tropic of Cancer is the beehive.
Oh, it's gate 15, right?
In the 72 wheel,
Oh,
it's
it's a different one.
yeah, it's slightly different, but in the two sort of tropics at the two different ends of our spectrum, you essentially have this, I like to say it's like the mother womb of nothingness that's kind of
Yeah.
like everythingness, but then in the summer solstice it is the everythingness. So the
Mm,
beehive is like the everythingness, like all of the fractals, the busy bees, like it's all the nectar, all the, but in the other side, it's the womb. And so you can actually see how perfect it is that that's the what we go through, because obviously you have the winter solstice, which is about that death and letting everything settle and pausing and taking that break and hibernation. And then in the summer, we have like the full abundance, the elixir, all the fruits and all. So you could say that on the winter solstice side, it's that what I call like negation, which is you could say this, I'm not this, I'm not that, and you're sort of releasing, shedding like the leaves. And then the other side is the more tantric path with the beehive, which is that, I am connected to everything, everything in the universe, all things, and that's affirmation. So it's so beautiful that you can see these dynamics in the wheel. When we start to add in the lost octave, it all just seems to make sense on a whole new level.
I love that. I didn't know that it was like the bee on the other side. I know that I mean, if you take the traditional I Ching, it's my north node is gate 10, but it's also the galactic center. So I always was like, okay, what the void, the galactic center, like how is that connected? Which is the very end of Sag in tropical or Western astrology. So I always wondered, does that mean going back to the end of or the start of the universe, the ultimate void, like the origin of everything, whatever that may be, And in a way it is the cosmic womb. And
Mhm.
so how is that then also connected with these, from the womb creating a hexagram? Because I see reality in itself with also the bees, they always form hexagrams. They always form these hexagram patterns in order to create whatever shape or pattern, right? And be connected. And so also seeing us as a collective, as all individual bees who pollinize with our energy field specific areas in order to create a web all over the planet. That's always how I even explain human design, how everyone works together and how we all have to work in synergy as the bees. There's also a book I can recommend to you, Song of Increase. Have you heard about it?
Mhm.
Story about how bees basically see the world and live and shape reality. And it's basically even what you shared with the codon. You just literally just released that, right? With the bees. It's all about that. It's all about how we move into the Aquarian age. I believe that we have to work in synergy. We're not an island anymore.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, with that, to say essentially that I mentioned, because we just did the star codon of magic, and it's kind of interesting because your name is magic, and that's
Yeah.
what sent it, because the star codon of magic is connected to this beehive, and that's where it was. I shared that the I Ching is a beehive of hexagrams. And so when we view it like that, because we're so used to seeing the stacked lines and everything else, but actually those six lines rearranged in that hexagon shape, and then you fuse it all together. And then that's why I say that the 432, this beehive is humming to the perfect resonance of Mother Earth. And
And
so,
the humming of bees is said to be the most healing frequency, anyways. It's, if you just listen to bees humming, your entire energy field is being restructured. Like literally, I'm not making this up. There's research about it. The semantics of it, it creates harmony. Like just listening to a beehive, it creates harmony in your field, similar to if you use tuning forks. I work with them a lot, but just listening to humming of bees, like it can be so simple.
yeah, exactly. And so all of these beautiful findings, and you were speaking about the galactic center. So it's really interesting because in the current sort of precession of the equinox, the galactic center actually aligns to the 13th sign, Orpheus. And this is what, when I went into the lost octave, Orpheus revealed who that truly is. And so what I did was, when you look at the name, I took the S from the end of Orpheus and put it on the beginning, and all of a sudden it said Sophia. And that is
Wow.
true identity. And when you were speaking about the Vitruvian Sophia that I drew, what I did was I took the constellation of Orpheus with the serpent, and I essentially took that the exact way the serpent is drawn on the illustration. I then took Sophia Vitruvius, made that, and then I drew in exactly where the serpent would be from the constellation, and it fit perfectly in her hands. And so this is when it's like, this is the true identity of the 13th sign, obviously the 13th being the divine feminine. And then,
For me, honestly, like that rings like straight up, that's Shakti. Like
yeah,
seriously, it's
exactly.
Shakti. It's Shakti, and then 14 is maybe Shiva, but it's very connected to, yeah, Shakti energy, creation energy, because out of the womb, out of the the feminine creates, destroys, destructs. Even when I was sharing with you the dark goddess here in the book that I just opened, and then there were also the beast, all the connections. It is the Kali, the beautiful mother of the void, swallow time like sweet nectar and serve the chains of karma for devote. Anyways, I don't have to read the whole thing, but it's the dark mother, where that disconnects us from the cosmic womb and pushes us into the world for creation, but then also pulls us back. It's just like, the dance and the pulse of the universe, so to speak. But there was something else that I wanted to say. Oh yeah, I was just listening again to the Sophia code. Did you go into Kiara's book?
I haven't, but I don't I don't really sort of have time to go into those sort of books,
Yeah,
but I
me
hear
neither. But I wanted to just share one thing about it, because I've read it ages ago, but this week specifically, which nothing is a coincidence. I just, for some reason, after listening to your podcast with Robert and just having conversations with friends, I was like, let me just go to one transmission again in the Sophia code, Hathor. And it's all about the voice, the throat, and you and Robert were talking about the new discovery of the throat, and all the new zodiac signs and everything you saw and in the dog, which we have to go into, which is in Gemini, and so it's all about creation through the voice. And in that transmission, it's not just about singing and humming and all of the things which get, again, humming is very connected also to the bees again, but how in the beginning was the word, everything is formed with sound and vocals, but also the DNA. She goes deep into amino acids in that transmission, which is not something that the rest of the book really covers. But for some reason in the Hathor transmission, she goes into like, understanding yourself as an electron, and how the electron is being informed through the voice and through instructions with the voice and a specific tone and tonality, which again really brought me back to, oh yeah, that's exactly what Egypt is all about, and the chambers and all of these things, like how we can inform ourselves, our electrons, and give directions to our inner structure, so to speak, or remind our inner structures about our coherence or not coherence, basically, and how we want to be wired. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. And where did I interrupt you? The
13th,
serpents. Yeah.
13th. Yeah, no, actually, it's just to touch on that, because this was this is all about the Venusian energy. So when Venus went into Leo, that's when this all happened. And so it was all about seeing it through that feminine lens. So when I discovered that it was Sophia, and it's actually Sophia Yuku. So if you actually look at the whole name, and Yuku means universe. So Orpheus actually is the universe of Sophia. That's the 13th sign. And when we look at the hexagram there, obviously it's pure yang. And of course, when we have looked in the past at sort of the I Ching as all yang, that's depicted this idea that it's a heavenly father, that it's actually like the father energy. But when I looked at it, it was like, no, 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 as you were saying, this is actually the pure Shakti. It's the pure Yang is actually the Shakti also. And so then this gave a whole new dynamic on how to read the hexagrams. And of course, if we have that 13th sign, as we know, they all work in their opposites, in their super partners. So that's what then took me on this journey of finding out this idea of the missing 1/14th, because in the Vitruvian Man, it's cut into 14 parts. In the story of Osiris, he's cut into 14 parts, and the missing 1/14th is essentially the male phallic. And the story where Isis, Sirius, essentially forms the phallic of Osiris and then gives birth to Horus. So this idea of the missing 1/14th, the missing 14th zodiac sign. So I knew where to look for it. And when I looked directly opposite Sophia, that's where I found Orion. And as we know, Orion is connected to all cultures, to the temples, to the pyramids. Orion's belt is perhaps one of the most famous stars, and yet it's not in our zodiac. And so then I tried to figure out, well, why is it not classified as a zodiac sign? Because it fits perfectly. And so I had to use astronomy, and there's a bandwidth in that any constellations that fall between the band of the zodiac where the sun transits is considered a zodiac sign. And then within this band, it wasn't the whole of Orion, it was Orion's right hand. And as soon as I knew that, that is the right hand of God. And so Christ was known as sitting on the right side of the throne of God. The archangel Metatron sits on the right side, and it's the right hemisphere of the brain. And so we've missed this connection to the right hemisphere of the brain, which awakens us into who we are. And so now we had this beautiful 13 and 14 to add in. And so Sophia sits on top of the ecliptic. So her feet and her Shakti belt. And I say she's the serpentine belt. So that's opposite Orion with Orion's belt. And so Orion is below with his right hand, and Sophia is above in the ecliptic. And so now this is where it all makes sense. And all of our stories about the dragons, serpentine energy, Kundalini, the right hand of God, the right hemisphere of the brain, this is all the stuff we've lost. And now we're starting to reclaim it. And this is all, bringing it all back for everybody to see. And yeah, it's just so beautiful finding these puzzle pieces.
And why do you think everything is so encrypted and laid out for us, specifically in Egypt? Like, I always wonder, like, it's like all the answers that we have, let's just say, all the questions that we have are answered in Egypt, but we don't see it really. So it's like so in front of our faces, but in a way, did we create a little joke for ourselves there? And, and then obviously not everyone is even feeling called in this lifetime to go there, but there are specific people that are just like, I need to go there and remember. So why do you think this is all happening right now for all of us?
Well, yeah, great question. I think for one reason, it's one of our oldest living records, right? So it's a record made in stone. So it was one of the only things that survived the cataclysms that we had. But of course, now it's so easy to see why it's coming in so strong, because as we're in the age of Aquarius, our opposite is Leo. And that was when the Sphinx was aligned to the precession of the equinox with Egypt. So you could see as ancient Egypt is now fueling our progression towards Aquarius. And so that's why at this moment, all of this Egyptian mysteries and reclaiming and all of that is happening, because we're now shifting into its opposite sign. So it's so beautiful. But I do think there are many traditions around the world, but I don't think they're just as famous or haven't been discovered yet. There are pyramids all over Mexico that are just sort of under all of the forests and everything else, and temples around the world. And really, we haven't explored. Asia is so huge. Japan, all of the traditions. And of course, the Vedas and the Vedic traditions, they were sort of, if you think about the precession of the equinox, so you could say that in true ancient Egypt, which could be akin to the end of Atlantis, that was the age of Leo. As we moved into Cancer, that's when the Great Flood happened. That's when we get the sort of ancient stories of this flood, and we get Noah's Ark. And then once we go through Cancer, we arrive in Gemini, and Gemini is Adam and Eve. So that's when humanity starts again. So it's like that reset part after the flood. And so really our known history has only been up to where Gemini has been. After Gemini, it's like, well, we don't really know, but the Sphinx and the pyramids is our first base touch of like, perhaps we are older than we think we want to be. And so we know that the pyramids are like at least 13,000 years ago. But I even said that it's possibly even a whole precessional equinox more than that. So civilization, you could say the golden age of Atlantis, could have been 30 to 40,000 years ago. That literally changes the whole history books of everything that we, came from apes, and our DNA was changed by space gods and all of this. It's like, yeah, we've done this many times before. So it's when you see that precession, and of course then Gemini happened, and then we entered the age of Taurus, which is Hathor, and that's how Egypt kind of looks now. From the age of Taurus is what, when we walk in Egypt, that's really what we're seeing, apart from things like the pyramids and the Sphinx. All of this Hathor, the Venusian, the divine feminine mysteries, that's all of there. And then of course that's when we made that transition from this story of Moses and the biblical records is out of Egypt, crossing the Red Sea and moving into the age of Aries. And that's where we have all the Abrahamic. So Abraham is Ram, and so the ram is Aries. And so this is all like, all of the biblical scriptures are all Aryan. And so we are the last part of the Aryan race. And so then of course we know we had the Christ teachings as we moved into the age of Pisces. And so now we're moving into the age of Aquarius, which is exactly opposite this 13,000 years ago, half precessional year from the age of the ancient Egypt.
It's very interesting too. I was thinking, I had even a dream last night. I remembered right before we jumped into the conversation, like, wait, why did I dream about this so vividly? Because today is Passover day, the returning of Christ. And so I was wondering, do you have any connection with lamb? Is there a lamb, like any mythology about lambs that we need to talk about today? Because obviously we have the full moon in Libra today, but then also we have Venus stationing on Passover day. And obviously everything with the lost octave is very connected to Venus, and Venus is moving into Aries. And there's a lot about this new vibration in Venus. I feel like she really got an upgrade. I mean, was that when Venus was also retrograde in Leo, like the Venus star point in Leo, when all of that came through for you?
She just moved into the Venus star point of Leo when the lost octave came.
Yeah.
And now she's in the star point of Aries.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is I spoke that she became the lioness queen of sovereignty.
Just to interrupt real quick, do you know your Venus star point you're born in?
I did know. I have to look back at it.
Mine is in Gemini, so I'm like, oh yeah, interesting.
I'm definitely a morning star in my Venus. But yeah, so that was the sort of the sovereignty queen of the lioness queen, and now she's moved into Aries. And what most people don't know, because they don't know the decans of astrology, which is what the lost octave is all about, is that within each sign there are 3 decans, and they're 10 degrees each. And what a lot of astrology has spoken of is that they look at them as elemental signs. So in Aries, they speak of the decans as the 3 other fire signs in the wheel. Yeah. But in the ancient Dendera stone, which is the heart chakra of Egypt, that's when we have the star law. of all the other constellations. So each of the deacons are the other constellations that surround the constellation of the zodiac. So when Venus is going into the first degrees of Aries, she's actually moving into Cassiopeia, which is, she's known as the queen of the heaven. So Venus in Aries is not just about Venus and martial energy and fire and the god of war. It's nothing to do with that. It's actually to do with, she's now sitting on the throne as the queen of the heaven. So,
and then match that with Neptune being right there too, you know, it's like how much more cosmic can we get?
yeah. So this shift into the maternal leadership, and it's the queen that's on the throne, and it's the Neptunian queen and the Venusian queen all merged into one. So you can kind of imagine, I speak of Neptune as Neptunia, the goddess Neptunia, you know, holding the trident, but she's holding the trident with love. So she's got the fire, but she's the Venusian energy. So, you know, it's got a very Athena type of feel to it as well. But yeah, the whole, every single biblical story I can find in the stars. There is not one story that I haven't found. And so this, you know, I love all myths, all philosophies, all, I think they're all great teachings. But it makes me wonder that I propose that I feel like everything that we've known that has been religion and mythology, all of it is really the wisdom of the stars. They're all up, all the stories are up there. And so then they personified the movement of the stars and what the battles in the stars and all of this stuff, all the creatures, they personified that into people to help us understand this idea of what we're meant to do as humanity. And so, yeah, the Lamb of God, well, the Ram, so that's in Aries. And what's really interesting, why do we have this crucifixion and resurrection? Like, how is that part of the same story? Well, what's really interesting is that we have the Lamb in Aries, but right opposite in the deacon, the first deacon of Libra, is the crucifixion in the stars. So again, when you work in their opposites and you understand the deacons, then you see all the stories.
You know that because the full moon obviously in Libra is now today happening as we record, with Chiron as well, the wounded healer and everything. So it's that, is that a late degrees or early degrees that you're talking about?
Early degrees of, it's the first 10 degrees of Libra. And what's interesting is that in the constellation, which is called Crux, which means crucifix,
yeah,
in that constellation, it's all about the 5 wounds of Christ. And so the 5 wounds of Christ is what I showed in my book, is the Vitruvian man, right? Because you have the nail in the 2 hands, and then you have the nail in the feet that are crossed over. And then what's interesting is this, the 5th wound is you have the crown of thorns, which is also in Libra, is the constellation Corona Borealis, is the crown. So that's the crown of thorns. And then the 5th wound is the spear in the side, right? So all of this is in the stars. And where's the spear? Well, Aries is the Venusian Athena. And so what does she carry? She carries the spear. And when you look at the equinox line between Aries going towards Libra, that's the line, that is a spear. So yeah. Aries spears the side of the Christ on the cross. So all of this is all talking about the equinoxes, the solstices, the movements. And so, yeah, this idea of today is we have this death and resurrection, because as the southern hemisphere is going into the crucifixion, the northern hemisphere is coming into the resurrection. So it's the sun's movement. So this death and resurrection is happening at the equinox point, is exactly what we're going through. So that is exactly what Passover is. It's the sun that passes over from the winter months into the spring. And then on the other side, the sun is descending into death. It's going in underneath the horizon. So that's why I say, you could take any mythology, every story you've ever heard, every film you've ever seen, nursery rhyme, fairy tale, every single thing is all written in the stars. And that's really my passion, is to bring that into people's awareness, so that it's not just about something that happened in history. It's a living transmission that every single year we, as the Christ energy, go through the death and resurrection process. It happens every year, this Passover. And that's why I think it's great that we can now merge the traditions in with actual what's happening in the solar system. And so most people would say that this is like, it's taken away from, or the religious aspect might be like, trying to keep it hidden. They try to keep the astrological stuff hidden and turn it into people. But I think as we see it as people in the past and as the stars, then we realize that we are playing out all of these beautiful biblical stories, narratives every single year. And of course, we're doing it in a huge processional cycle as well. So yeah, I just feel it makes it even more magical.
Absolutely. And, it's stuff like that. It's just, for me, it's such a soothing kind of, I mean, at the end of the day, we all use these things and receive these things, have it in our field to remember one thing, which is that we are all just an idea of God playing out, an idea about a specific movie, character, play, however you want to say that, symphony. God just wanted to have some fun and entertain himself and created, the plot here. Even Yogananda said, it's just all a stage. It's all a stage. And we all just forgot in a way which part of the play we are, right? And then the whole thing gets messed up and we think we are in chaos and everything is, we have to struggle for our own survival and things, but that's just all an illusion because we are all just in the same play. It's like, even the fact that we meet only specific people in this lifetime, not everyone. So why do we meet these specific people? It's not something that we could plan or orchestrate ourselves. It's like, no, the stage was prepared before you came here. You just have to show up for your part. And that's why I love to work with tools like you use, or astrology is the best, because it's just really your, let's just say, plot coded in your DNA. What the instructions for your cells. We just didn't know how to read the code anymore. And
Yeah.
that's the issue.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's why I say that it's funny within Egypt, because as you go up to the king's chamber, you go through the grand gallery. Well, what is the grand gallery? Well, when you look out at the stars, that is God's gallery, right? It's
Yeah.
all the images, all the movies. It's like, in the ancient times, they would sit around,
Netflix, what do you want to watch, Yeah.
yeah, they would sit around the campfire, and depending on the stars that were in the sky, the elders would share the stories of the stars to the tribe, to the people, to the children. And so that is the movie, that is God's gallery. So as you move up into the king's chamber, you've got the grand gallery, and then you go into the king's chamber, which we now discovered is essentially a stargate, a star map, and all of that orientation. And so that's exactly what this process is all about, is saying that we've been so disconnected from nature, from the stars, from the planetary movements. And as you say, now we have the code to come back and say, this is the handbook that you never got when you were born. And so you can use your natal chart, and they actually say the 36 deacons, its ancient name is the 36 faces of God, right? Or the 36 faces. So it's essentially all the same one, as you're saying, with all these different faces. And when we think of astrology in this way, it's not that myth is going to be your life. It's that when you know the myth of your natal charts, then you can play them out, but then how you move through that myth and rewrite the narrative is the living process that you're doing. So it may be this sort of sense that, there's this hero and he comes to save the damsel and he has to slay the dragon, right? That's such an old school patriarchal narrative. Well, I shared in the book that it's not about you as you live this, it's more about the feminine, the divine feminine within you, or the feminine as a woman realizes who she is, and she can break her own chains. And then instead of slaying the dragon, she can befriend the dragon, become a dragon rider, right? And so like how you decide to move through that myth is the reason why you are on the planet. You're changing the narrative through how you're living it, and then, like you said, that's a new code that's uploaded into the field, the collective consciousness field, and now that becomes a norm of like, yes, there's an opportunity for the hero, there's an opportunity for the empowered feminine, and this is what I think this flip into the divine feminine view is helping us
It's
say
all
it's a new narrative.
it's also, what Robert says, like Robert Edward Grant a lot, and I mean, it's ultimately true in the, I mean, could be more true. It's all about judgment, it's like, do we judge God's creation? Like, do we, or again, going back to Gene Key 10, do we allow people to just be and play out their myth and play out their role? Or do we judge what or how they behave? Or are they just playing out the role that they are meant to play out in the grand stage of things, which can sometimes be hard for the human to wrap your head around because, there is obviously a lot of polarity happening and contrasting experiences, but that's also needed for a really good movie to be fun. Let's be real, right? We cannot just have, harmony all the time and there's no tension, no nothing, no fights. I mean, it's boring. You would, not watch again. So it's like, yeah, we need some friction, we need some tension, we need some, challenges and all of these things. So I think it's really about not judging our own experience and also our own polarity experiences too, or contrasting experience where we are not showing up as our best, but then we also show up our best again. And, we learn through these experiences, or we have challenging upbringing, but not judging that or making it something that is because we are wrong, but really understanding, no, that it's meant to be this way because
Mhm.
that's the plot that we signed up for and the experience that that the divine wants to have through us. And the same is true for every other situation in the world. And when you stop that judgment, we come back to one of my favorite gene keys to contemplate also. I think it's your sun, even 22 and 25. I love them.
Yeah.
22, suffering is grace, has been just my biggest, like, I love that one. And 25 is universal love, but it's also this core wound of being separated from source and all alone and all of these things. So it's really about understanding, no, we are not. And, even our suffering, that's God's hand, redirecting us into harmony and love. And ultimately, every single myth or story is about the return to love. Even, Cyrus, Osiris, and Isis, it's all about the return and the bringing back the pieces of love that we lost along the way. And that's every single story and every single myth. It's all about returning to love and moving away from the judgment, the fighting, and all of these things. But there's something else that I wanted to, maybe I'm just dumb like that, but it just rang a bell when you were saying 36 all the time. Like, yeah, 36 times 2 is 72 again,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And then also thinking of the 3, 6, and 9, which is Tesla, right? The 3 and the 6, and then the 72 adds to the 9 again. So there's this patterning happening, the 3, 6, 9, and then it's like all everywhere. I mean, it's wild.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. Like it's that error correction code because
Yeah.
everywhere you look into it, and there's like the vortex mathematics and things like the Enneagram. It's all based on this nine number, and nine I wrote in the book. So I shared about in the book that it's the law of octaves, what's called the law of octaves, and it's the beginning is the end, and the end is the beginning. Right. So as we know that as we go into that, say Stargate 10, then that's that womb, and in the maternal DNA, it's a stop codon. So it's this moment of stop, but then that's also the moment of then something new to be born. So it's exactly the alpha omega in this idea, and that number nine is exactly the same. So when you take the numbers 1 to 8, they're sort of like the forever spiraling reincarnation cycle,
Yeah.
right? 1 to 8, but then 0 to 9, well, 9 equals 0. So this is what makes it kind of quite crazy, because if everything starts adding up to 9 and 9 equals 0, then really nothing is happening nothing has ever happened, but yet it's all happening. And so there's this beautiful shift. And the way you can say, why is 9 0? Is that when you take the numbers of any mathematical number of that has nines in it or adds up to 9, when you do its numerology, it will code down to 0. And so you can replace any 9 in a number sequence with a 0 and it adds up to the same total, which is really wild. It's a loophole in mathematics. And that's why I say like we're moving into the quantum field where in the sharing in Gemini, I spoke about the quantum I Ching and how that's going to work. And essentially what happens is that every 0 is also a 1. Every yin is also the yang. And so it's like when the observer observes the situation, the wave collapses into the particle. And so it's dependent on what is happening in the moment. So if you imagine these two potentials of yin and yang, and as soon as it's observed, it will choose which one to connect with. And that's this idea of the quantum, that really all the yin lines are also yang lines. And so then now this opens up like a whole new field of that things are always in their present moment shifting and changing. And part of the way we can understand this is that I shared that the lines from going from 6 lines, actually I found that the lost octave has 7 lines. So there are 7 lines to you could say a hexagram, but of course it merges into a septagram. And then I took it one step further and I realized that there are actually 8 lines in the quantum field. So this now opens up the I Ching to its next, what I call the next octave. And I plan to write the next octave as my next book, probably in a couple of years' time. But it's this understanding. And obviously the 7th line is this crown chakra. So
I'm pretty sure there's a 9th octave, I swear. Like
oh,
the like the
it goes on like fractally forever. But as I'm going through it, I'm just sort of helping people shift from where we are into the 72 and then introducing the 7 lines and then the 8 lines. And so then now we can start to link it to the quantum realm. And it's really beautiful how the hexagrams are connected. And so you see this in Gemini, it's very mercurial, all of this, the quantum. And what's funny is that the 7 and 8 lines work as quantum superimposition. So they can be yin and yang, and they can flip and change. So it's in the 3D reality, we're used to it like this is male, this is female. Well, in the next octaves, it's like, well, there's the female inside the male inside the female. And then we shift up again, and then we say, oh, the male and female are inside the feminine, the male and female are inside the masculine, and then they have mirrors. So now you have 4. And that takes me back to, in the book I shared about a new psychology called quadrinity psychology.
Oh
So
my God, you have to fucking read this book, or I know you don't have time, but if you don't read this book, I feel like it will really bring you into even more researching stuff, because it's also about basically, I'm gonna have to interrupt you now because I kept mentioning it to you and I feel like that's not a coincidence. It's all about the return to love in a way, but understand like it's about a story of a boy that then ends up running around like the Vitruvian man naked. And he ends up in a mental world where he has an encounter with a dog. And the dog is a mythology for life and explains life to him through helping him understand that every single human has 3 minds. And that's like a new thing of psychology, even in the book Ray, it's called like whatever. And it's like intellect, reason, and instinct, and helping you understand how even there are subtypes to these 3 types that are mixed together. You have more instinct, more reason, more whatever. It's a whole thing. There's an entire thing about that. But it goes deeper into understanding how everything is also coincidence and synchronicity and all played out, basically, and how we make judgment based on how our mind is hardwired to think more in regards to reason or instinct and what was the other thing? Intellect, exactly. But then also goes deeper into mythologies and stories with the stars, with numbers, with geometry, with even, you know, what we shared about time, where there are 7 proofs in the book about how what is shared basically is true or not, and the true path to love. And then there are also the 12 zodiacs involved, and the 12 myths in the mind based on these 3 mental concepts and the ways of thinking, and the judgment we make because of it, and the decisions we make in life and our life trajectory. And what did I want to share about it? It's basically 7, like it also goes into the 7 proofs, but then there's also the 12 again, scientific proofs, and there's the last one that the book has no author. I don't know if you know that. So basically the book has no author. No one knows where this book even came from. And the whatever put it out there after finishing said that there will be one person that will basically uncover the last hidden proof that can only be understood if you dismantle all of the distortions in your own brain. And then it goes deeper into, you know, the music, number, poetry, and that only these kinds of things that are not mental constructs help us see life through the eyes of love and reconnect us with our true nature. And so I think everything that you do, the work that you do, that Robert does, that we all do, is kind of like an analogy to what this book is also all about. I'm only halfway through it, so I can't, you know, I don't know, but I feel like you need to read this. It's like so wild, because maybe the lost octave is, you know, what he was referring to, that someone will get a transmission where it will be so crystal clear that this is the truth, or like this is love, this is the path to it all. So yeah, I just needed to put that out there. Where did I interrupt you? Oh yeah, you mentioned something about psychology.
Yeah, so no, that's beautiful, and yeah, I love that. I mean, that's all the whole part. We're all here to put our piece into the beehive, right, and to gift it into the collective. And yeah, so in the book, I shared about this new psychology called quadrinity psychology, and that means essentially 4. So you have a trinity, and then the quadrinity, and so what we've been working with so far in collective humanity is this understanding of the Holy Trinity, right? The Trinities. But in the deeper esoteric wisdoms and in geometry, what you'll find is that a trinity might be a triangle, but a 3D tetrahedron has 4 points, and the 4th point is the center. It's a quadrinity. So as we move up dimensions of geometry, we move up dimensions of understanding. So within the Trinity is the secret 4th, the quadrinity. So when I speak about...
Also, I wanted to just refer that back to the book, because it says the 4th dimension is time, right? And then we think obviously the 3rd dimension we are in, and then moving to the 4th dimension, which is time. There's proof in the book that, you know, the 4th dimension is very connected to the 1st dimension, which is a dot, which is just this one seated point, where we also understand that nothing can repeat itself or meet itself. Like everything is kind of unique and fractal. So there's no point in time where it can merge, because when we put another point into it and we move into the 4th dimension, like all possibilities open up. It becomes quantum, it becomes bigger, because the 3rd dimension makes it believe that it's like very fixed, right? It's like the 3rd dimension, sorry, is very fixed. It's like this triangle trinity. We can't really, but the 4th dimension opens up to time space, where all possibilities, the quantum really exists. And everyone obviously always thinks about, we need to be in the 5th dimension, but it's like, no, can we maximize or change the perception of time? Because then we can also alter time, history, and like everything is basically, then again, the point, the origin seed, which is now, which is the 1st dimension again, which is kind of wild. So there's a connection to time and the 1st dimension and the dismantling of time, which I feel like is also happening right now with all of the we question time. Time is different. Time changes, and
Mhm.
yeah. So that entire like, yeah, what you were just, I just wanted to add that. Yeah,
Yeah,
go
I'll
ahead.
I'll add some stuff about time because that's also so connected to why I shared the lost octave. But yeah, just to say that every sort of the lost octave hexagrams and how they work, I share that they work in these quadrinities. And what it is, it's a way of how energy comes from the source, or you could say the source within, how it comes from that idea of the highest frequency into actual embodiment. So there's the top part is what I call the light. Then you have the integration, then the transformation, and then the embodiment. So it gives you the energetic process of how to live the essence of each of those hexagrams. And so this is like the new way to see the psychology of how to integrate work with this. And so you mentioned the 22. So I'm currently writing this next book about the 72 stargates. I'm taking each individual stargate and writing the quadrinity psychology for them. And so the 22 came in my work as glory, right? So, and glory is it's an interesting word because it can mean weight in the ancient world, but it's also, you could say it's the glory of the divine, right? It's that you are living now, and it's the glory of life. And so, and the 25 is eternity, right? So it's the light of eternity, and that's got an embodiment of beauty, because you could say like, what is the, how can you live the highest essence in human form? That's what the embodiment part is. And so how can you live eternity in human form is to live as beauty in everything that you do, everything that you share, everything that is around. So it's so beautiful to then give it now these other parts of the structure into like, how do we take the teachings and pull it into our lives? So I just wanted to touch on that because it's a huge topic, and it's about this fourfold nature. So we're used to duality, and then we're used to this trinity being this sort of the idea of trying to bridge that duality. But then once you've kind of got that, in the very center is the embodiment. Is that like, now you've got the trinity. The thing that we've been missing is, okay, that's all there, but then how does that manifest in human expression? And that's what I wanted to bring into the lost octave.
It's
So
also a very, when you think of the Vedic tradition, and I come from Chika Tantra, where it's all about, Shiva, Shakti, Nara, and you're Nara, so you're basically playing out the story of the divine, but then moving into a more that again, like that quadruple understanding. Well, yes, but then also maybe there's the fourth element, which could be you watching Shiva, Shakti, Nara playing out their thing and being like, hey, can I just add something, or can we just, rearrange? Can I be a conductor there? Like, to really get your power back in that entire thing and not feel like, okay, I'm just here down there playing out the, whatever of the divine, to really more understand like, how can I shape reality through the heart? But I also believe that that's only opening up for us if, again, we merge into this, we do it from the heart and not from like the ego, because that's why we are sort of like locked in that 3D world, let's just say, where we feel like, oh my gosh, we can't do anything because we misused our power in that way. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so for me, I like to see it as energy. That's how I started my whole sort of spiritual journey, was about energy healing, understanding that and learning modalities and how energy works. That felt like my natural language. So when I applied that to psychology, it was like, well, what's the highest essence, the light? What then is the feeling of like, okay, I'm starting to understand and understand this. That's your integration. Then it's like, what do I need to do then to shift into that vibration? That's your transformational process. And then once you've gone through all of those, then comes the embodiment, becomes the byproduct of that whole cycle. So it's like a an energy moving in, or blossoming from within. And so that's what I feel is it's been really helping people figure out like how to work with hexagrams on a deeper layer, and going back to time, well, the whole front cover, you'll see it, is it's a hypercube. So the lost octave is a hypercube, and that's the Venus star, the eight-pointed Venus star, or the star of Inanna. And I realized that Inanna's symbol is not just an eight-pointed star, but it is a hypercube. And so when we speak about like dimensions, and like you said, a lot of people, oh, fifth dimension, 10th dimension, 12th dimension, all of these things. When I share about it, I share about it through the lens of mathematical dimensional geometry. So the fourth dimension being time in mathematical geometry is, like I was saying, it's a cube inside a cube, or as I prefer to say, it's a star within a star. So it's the Venus star within itself. So you have the morning star and the evening star. And what happens in the fourth dimension is that as you move forwards, then also we move backwards. And then the backwards becomes forwards, and then the forwards returns backwards. And so it's doing this morphing pattern. So that's where our ancient history and our future are linked together in our present moment. And so, like you're saying, as we move through this, we're affecting the past, and then that's creating a new future in every moment, every decision we're making. And that's this whole understanding that we really do need to shift. Unless you learn these things, then to try and understand the fifth dimension, you're just kind of like floating in abstract ideas. So there is a sort of a step-by-step process, a scientific mathematical way that you can open up the left hemisphere of the brain using stories and myths and feeling, linking it to the left-hand side, which is all the maths and geometry, and then there's progressions to do all of this. So that is really what I feel like the collective is at right now. And we're all experiencing time being weird, of speeding up, kind of ancient history, and then like the quantum physics of like the Aquarian age. And it's like, wow, like so much is all happening and opening. And so if we don't have the ways to integrate this, to understand this, and to reclaim and live the myths, then we're just going to be overwhelmed by what is being unfolding at the moment.
And I also feel like how do I put that? What I've noticed the last months, it's been very obvious. I mean, for me anyways, where different timelines are playing out inside of myself and my reality every day. And like literally, I mean, I get this download that was kind of like terrifying me back in 2016 or whatever, where it was just all of a sudden so crystal clear to me that every single day I wake up in a different dimension. And first it was like really frightening because I was like, yeah, I'm actually really, like, every day we die and every day we wake up in a new reality. It's not the same world, even though it looks the same. And then I understand the power in that. I'm like, yeah, well, that's also great, because then nothing is set in stone, right? But that can also be terrifying. But then also seeing that throughout the day, we live in different times. Like our body lives in the morning, maybe through an emotion from childhood, and is basically 5 again. Or, you know, in the afternoon, you had a conversation with your mom, and all of a sudden you live a story of an ancestor through that conversation. And you don't even, it's like all processed through your body, because you're basically a data recording machine. And while all of this is happening, we are also I feel like getting these upgrades, right? And it's like the system reboots itself, meaning that a lot of old files and programs come to the surface to be cleansed, and you know, to do the Mercury retrograde work, so to speak, in ourselves. We're like, okay, this needs to be decluttered, this needs to be decluttered, this file needs to, there's a tab open that, you know, should already be closed. And when we do that, and we do that energetic cleansing, we obviously create space on the hard drive for new information to come down. And that's all happening all at once inside of our own nature. And that's why I think everything is so speeding up for all of us right now, because it's happening in everyone right now. It's like the cosmos being like, okay, we do a little, you know, speed upgrade for everyone. And everyone is a bit overwhelmed and tired and from all of the work that we are doing. But that's also what opens us to all of these new perceptions and understanding, because with a clean hard drive, right, with a faster operating machine and a new update, then people like you and Robert, the geniuses, like get new downloads, and it's like, oh, there's a new program for humanity. And that's the magic in it. But obviously, I mean, I don't know how you navigate these days. I would love to hear, because I'm pretty sure you are busy with like receiving downloads, writing books, but then also have to work through your own stuff.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And funny enough, I was just about to say about that because in the book, I put in the book a process that I was able to that I figured out that allowed me to write the book. So this whole book idea was pretty crazy. I'd never written a book before. I'd never even thought about doing that ever in my life. I was never really somebody that would write long things. I would always write sort of like one-liners or sort of pointings or things like that. But then this book is like 250,000 words. Never written a book before. And so I did all of this in 9 months, right? This huge book in 9 months. And so how I managed to do that was that this process of how to change a belief instantaneously. And I gifted that into the book because what was happening was that as I was writing, of course, there's this discrepancy, right, between you, the human, and the pure consciousness, you could say, of your higher self or the field or whatever. And so as I was sort of writing something, I would notice exact words or phrases that felt like they were either a bias or they were keeping a ceiling or they were running the same narrative as what I knew. And so every time I'm writing every word, it was like I was checking in with, is this the purest, most open space that invites somebody into a doorway for them to have their own experience? That's what's all of my sharing's about. It's, I have a map. I can say, you get to this doorway, here it is. Now you go inside and have a good time and tell me what you experienced. Long gone, I think, of the days of that, oh, this is that in these absolute ways, because in a multidimensional way, like everyone's going to have their unique gift in there. And so as I figured out this way of how to rewire my brain, and of course it couldn't be a long process because I'm writing this book at such a speed. So one morning I woke up and I managed to find a loophole in the human intellect. And
Hello.
well, yeah, it explains it all in the book. It's kind of a long thing to go through, but how can I say? It's all about reversals.
Yeah.
And so in the book, I share about the idea that the Earth is going through a pole shift, and we are going through a pole shift internally. And that pole shift can be either, if you're essentially connected to the masculine, you're then shifting into understanding the feminine and vice versa, or it could be that if you see the world in this way, you're actually going to see it almost in the complete opposite way. And so we have to find the bandwidth of our two poles, and by doing that we tread on the other pole, and then it flips our pole up, and then
we balance out, right?
balance the hemispheres. Yeah. And so it's the same thing, head and heart, hemispheres of the brain, however it plays out in your life. We all need to go through this to essentially prevent, when the Earth goes through the pole shift, to prevent the cataclysm of the Earth, we need to do the internal pole shift, and then that will stop when the pole shift happens, that will stop the cataclysm happening. So a loophole in the mind is that the way in which when we're trying to investigate something, we're trying to feel and we're trying to sort of ask questions or introspect about something. But the way in which we've been introspecting is from one point of view. And so when you sort of reverse a question, like, how can I say, let's say you don't feel abundant in your life. You're really struggling for money, and you're like, how am I going to get a job? How am I going to feed myself? You're in a real panic state of that. How do I get out of that? Because that's obviously, we know it's not just a mindset, it's also a living experience, it's emotions and all of the things and opportunities and all of these matter. But what can we do to empower ourselves in that moment. And so it's this idea of I don't know how to change my mentality of feeling broke when I know I'm broke, but I want to feel abundant. It feels like it's such a huge, it feels like you're faking it till you're making it, you know? So you can ask this simple question in this, and this is one part of this whole thing, is you ask this question, which is a reverse, which is, why do I feel so abundant?
And then your mind is like, wait, what did you just ask? I was saying the exact opposite.
Exactly. So what it does is that the mind sets out to prove what you say.
Mm.
So when you say like, I am broke, and that could be a realistic matter of fact. Well, of course, the mind finds,
But the question is always opening you to something. You know, like a statement is fixed, but a question is like curiosity. It's not the end of the road. That makes sense.
yeah, that absolutely that as well. And so this idea of like, if you say like, I am broke or whatever, then the mind finds all of the reasons to affirm why you're broke. So then when you say, why am I abundant? The mind has a bit of a schism because it's like, well, hold on a minute. It doesn't feel abundant, but yet you're asking me the question, why am I? So then it goes, well, I mean, you're breathing, you have a roof over your head, you have food in your cupboard. You might not be healthy, but it's like some crackers, you can survive. Oh, you've got some family members, and then all of a sudden the mind starts to find all of the reasons. And if you can sit in that and just allow it, like you've typed in the Google of your own brain, why am I
I was
abundant?
just about to say, it sounds like asking, you know, when you type into ChatGPT, I'm broke. I'm not sure if there's like so much that it would say, but if you ask ChatGPT a question, it comes up with all different rabbit holes. It like it literally fills up the space with so much you can go into. And that's, you know, how you can trick your brain. It's like asking a good question and your brain's busy, you know?
So we're what I said is it's you're making your mind work for you rather than against you. And in this, is this the teaching of the 12 disciples? So that your mind becomes your disciple, that it wants to serve you, right? And so we're so used to us feeling sort of we belong to the mind rules us. Then when you flip it inside out, the mind then serves you. And so as I was writing the book, everything that I came across, like these glass ceilings that I had, I would then be able to go through this instantaneous, and it is so instant, these things. And I literally was going through every belief that I had. I went through like these 13 beliefs in seconds, huge beliefs that I had, 13 just, and ever since then, they've never been in my life. So it was instantaneous, and it's pretty brave to say that you can change a belief instantaneously. But I put it in the book, and I'm like, don't take my word for it, do it, and you'll see it. And so that's how I was able to do this. And then through that process, in the end, I didn't have to then ever ask the questions. As soon as I came across like a phrase, and I thought, that doesn't seem expansive enough. It doesn't seem quite there. And I would just pause, and my brain's now rewired to do this automatically. Now it's gonna, and then I just reword it. And so now transmissions are effortless, and I get to journey through the process of it, and I get to bring in the pure transmission of it to share. And that's really how then the next transmission in Lionsgate again 2024, I then came through with the part two, which is the star codons, which is linking all of the DNA and the maternal DNA. I deconstructed the whole maternal genetic code and linked it to the hexagrams for the first time.
Love that. Amazing. And so what is on the agenda for this Lionsgate and the rest of this
Um,
year? Because I feel like you will, I feel like this year for you, you will have so many more. I mean, with the transits that are going on, you're definitely being onto something.
yeah, I mean, I've already got, honestly, I have about, I don't know, maybe 13 whole new programs, constructions, new things, and that They're all sitting on the shelf. So I sort of create them and I put them on the shelf for when they're sort of ready. And of course, the star codons is so huge. It takes, every single part, all 72 hexagrams. It links all the amino acids and the maternal DNA amino acids. And there's a difference as well. And that's why this one about the 10 is interesting because, in the normal nuclear DNA, which has been known in the human design, that's one amino acid, but then the maternal DNA was saying it's a stop codon. And then when I went through it more and I released this as well about that, what I found was 61 was also a start codon. Now, this was pretty baffling because what we'd known up to this point is that 41 was the only start codon. Well, then I found the maternal DNA start codon is 61. And so then I called that Eve. So 41 is Adam, 61 is Eve. And they are genetic lovers. They are pairs in the genetic code. And so you have the feminine maternal start codon happens. So after the 10 is the stop codon, then as we go along a few gates, then we have the beginning of the stirring of the feminine in the soil, in the earth. She starts to take her first movement, and that's the start codon. And that was so beautiful to see that we're literally seeing now through the star codons the other side of the story. So you have the sort of the masculine connection of the genetics, like we've known that, but now it's like, what is the mother doing? What's Mother Gaia? What is nature doing? And so it coincides so beautifully with the summer solstices, the winter solstices, and it's all so profoundly connected to the seasons. And so it's the natural rhythms of the feminine flow. And you were saying about like, why is there's all these 12s? Well, 12 is all linked to the masculine. And that's why we see it's about 12s in the tropical zodiac, about the sun going through the 12 signs. Well, the 13th is the feminine. So we have 13 moon cycles a year. So we have 13 months a year of 28 days. So we're actually missing a month. And that month happens to be the summer solstice month. That's where the missing 13th month is. And so when you include 13, you're now moving it back into the traditional matriarchal rhythm. And it doesn't mean that the 12's obsolete, but you've got two running at the same time. And so you've got the solar 12 and lunar 13. And so they're all coming together. And there's this beautiful mathematical triangle that creates the philosopher's stone, where you have a 12, a 13, and a 5. And the 5 is the 5 elements. And this is a harmonic connection in mathematics. So when you're doing this, we can now say that we can work with this 13-month calendar. And then that's when I found that there's the balance of the missing 1/14th in the zodiac. So it's realigning us back into the natural rhythms of life. And that's where we felt so disconnected, because our calendar, our months, our cycles, the feminine, menstruation cycles, ovulation cycles, all of that has been sort of dismissed. And so now with this work, I'm reinstating this and giving the mathematical scientific reasoning as to how this all works.
I love that, because while you were sharing that, it reminded me I had this download I wanted to do with a good friend. He's really deep into human design, same friend that I went to Egypt with. And basically we were talking about the lunar and solar reversal that is also happening, when we go into the age of the sleeping phoenix, and like even the genetics of our body changes from the more consciousness in the solar plexus towards the spleen, like the more instinctual, the more of that, and how we've been really disconnected from the rhythms of our own nature, and that's being reversed. And so I'm actually wondering now, because I just looked up my notes from back then, because I wrote down all of the gates in the solar plexus and the spleen. And even, what did I write about Orion's belt there? Solar plexus should not be run by the moon, but the sun. Orion's belt, Vitruvian man. That was just a random note on my notes back then. So obviously, whatever. I have to go into it again. So yeah, but because the gene keys transmission there is all about gate 55, and there's also gate 22, but gate 55, what is your connection to the I Ching with the 55 and that entire transmission based on like through the lens of the lost octave? Like how connected are you to that 55?
Yeah, great question. I actually posted about the 55, and because I've linked all of the star codons to like the tarot as well, and all of the DNA, and I spoke that the 55 is actually connected to the Tower card, right? And so this goes back to ancient Babylon, where they had the Tower of Babel and the fall of Babylon. And what was that all about? Was about the fact that we had this one language, and then when the tower fell, we split into lots of different languages, and then that's what created this sort of chaos and this idea of separation of religions, traditions, and all of these things. So it, in their sense of fractaling out, was a sort of a chaotic fractal. And so the 55 is this idea of the tower moment, right? And of course we're experiencing that, right? Is that all structures are falling, and we're trying to find, essentially now we're trying to repair and find the one language where we can all connect, and everyone can have their own fractal parts, but there's a common universal energy there that we're saying all meeting in the heart, or we're more compassionate towards every religion, that every religion has the essence is the same. So that's really the link. But in the lost octave wheel, because there's 8 more gates now, we are already way over halfway through the 55 as a collective. So to me, this idea of the 2027 moving into this new shift, for me, in my calculations, we've already been in this shift for 300 years. So we're actually now moving more towards the 30, which is the fire over fire.
The 30 or 13?
30, 30.
Oh, 30. Interesting.
So,
Oh, that, oh my gosh.
right?
Like I have it on my notes here. What is it? Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I had literally, it's like gate 55, abundance and spirit, and then the next one is gate 30, desire, which is obviously the word in itself means from God. Like it's a Greek word. Every desire is from God. So it's like moving into that God consciousness. It's
Yeah.
like,
So
yeah.
fire over fire. So you can kind of see, because the image of the Tower of Babel, obviously it's on fire. So you can see how they're so linked. But of course, in my work, that is the sacred swan. And the swan is all about speech. It's Sarasvati in the Vedic system. And so it's all about music, harmony. And I spoke about it as the black and the white swan, integrated as one. So this is a process of our Ida and Pingala now coming into the central channel. And the central channel is the Sarasvati River. And so it's actually about the purification of the fire, not to necessarily burn and destruct, but to refine our speech, to bring things together, the burning of the fire in the heart. And so it's really beautiful. And that's why I say, like, the 55, yeah, it's my experience of it is it's kind of quite, it's the tower moment. So it can be quite abrupt shifts. But to me, we're already halfway through that transit. We're actually more, or further than that, we're actually more akin into moving into the 30 and understanding what that means. And that 30 is connected to the age of Aquarius. And then in the lost octave, the 66, which is the highest master number gate, is in Aquarius. So when you add in the lost octave, what's interesting is that what most people are focused on the 55, but in my work, it's all about the 66. So it's like, you see the octave up? It's really interesting. Both
11.
numbers. And so, yeah, I think all of the palindrome gates, the ones that are like fire over fire, water over water. And of course, we know the 29 is the super partner to the 30. So we have the water over water, fire over fire, and then we have this idea of the swan, because Cygnus, the swan, which is the womb in the Egyptian mysteries of all creation, it's Nut's womb. You know, Nut, she's the goddess, the Milky Way, and you see her, she's sort of like bent over in the iconography. At the very womb of Nut is Deneb, which is in Cygnus. And so the swan is the cosmic womb, the mother womb. So the 30 is this basically being the reborn again as the new human, the new humanity. That is really where the lost octave points us to, is that is what we are shifting. And the 55, the tower moment that we've, that's the last 300 years, which we've seen, such a huge shift from even 100 years ago to now. It's unbelievable. So we've already been in that process. And so now that's why I say that really we are in the age of Aquarius. We are really in that cusp of the 55 and actually more the 30. And I feel like in the next maybe 10 years, I think that the 30, or maybe like 2032 into 2040 is when we're going to feel that 30 really switching online. And it's going to be amazing if we can find the universal language. And I think the astrology and the mythology and the stars, all of this, and the genetics, how they're all linked now, I think there's going to be this universal language. And in some way, AI is sort of this weird intermediary of like a universal language. It sort of knows everything, it sort of connects everyone, and everyone can sort of add into it as AI learns in its language models is all about AI. So it's weird that AI is like a tester for us to find common unity. And so, yeah, that's what I feel.
I also feel that gate 30 with its, meaning with desire, if everyone would approach their life like that, like just with, even the concept that you shared with your psychology and the loop in the mind, asking yourselves, like literally your body, like your geometry, your structure, your everything, what desire wants God to live through me? That simple question, and just sitting there curious, with curiosity, with maybe the Lost Octave, the book, and all the tools that we have, to be like, with oh my gosh, I remember my words, which myth does God want to play out through me?
Mm-hmm.
And we all follow that question, or the impulse that we get from asking that question, then we already create that harmony and coherence in the plot that we came here to play. So that already is a reset code in a way,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Absolutely. And so I share that the 30 is about invitation. So it's the invitation. So of course, all invitations that we often think, oh, if I get invited to something, then that's a good thing. But we know that there are invitations that take you into the negative things, right? So we can say it's this idea of the, the temptation of taking something that's easy, or something that's going to give you instant gratification, or there's an invitation to go to a party, but then you sort of feel like, oh, I don't want to connect with those people, or whatever it may be. It's all about the invitation. And there's not a right or wrong choice, because we learn from all of it. But there are higher choices and less vibratory choices. So this is the empowerment that we're being gifted back in the 30, is to say there's a fire of warmth and love, or there's a fire of destruction. You choose, and whichever way, that's exactly how it's meant to go. But it's gifting us this. So for me, it's all about the light of that is vigilance. So, and vigilance is an interesting word, because it can kind of feel a bit like too stark, vigilance. It's a bit, can feel quite aggressive, but it was Papaji. I don't know if you know Papaji, a very famous sage. And he said that vigilance was the step to the divine. and he used it in this way of such a heart connection of saying it's like, be aware, just observe, feel into what's going to take you into the highest path and what's going to take you back into the cycles and the lower paths. And so it's almost like a discernment, but it's this awareness of being alert and doing it. It's not just sort of like a discernment like yes and no. It's like, well, maybe you choose a lesson, you take an invitation, and maybe it's going to be potentially a bit fractious in its energy, but you feel like you might learn something. So you go into situations like aware. And so I can see where you've got the connection with the desire, because in mine it's about temptation versus vigilance. But yeah, this is like all of where we're moving into. It's all power to the people, right? It's like the Aquarian
Making
age.
it conscious, like even I just yesterday had a conversation with a friend and said, you are not your thoughts. You receive them, and if you can see them just as suggestions, right? Or, temptations, like the mind comes up with all kinds of ideas, what you could do, what you could think, how you could spend your day. It's like an entertaining machine, or even, AI. It's like, do you want this? It can go into rabbit holes, but it doesn't mean that you have to follow everything. You can just simply be like, that's an interesting idea. I could consider that, or I could not, and just making that conscious and not being, or in conscious awareness and not being a puppet and be like following every single impulse that you get, or following every single temptation or invitation, as you said. That's really when we become conscious observers, and then we're like, okay, I go into that. And then, the whole thing of blame, shame, guilt when we do things that and mess up, it's like, no, I chose this. Like it comes from a more empowered place.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's the beauty of seeing the star law, you see, because when you know that the 30 is connected to the swan, well, then that gives you a feel of the star that's kind of going to gift us the humanity's energy. And of course, it's so beautiful to have Saraswati, the goddess, and the speech and the music. And so you get this idea of what it's about. And, this idea of that you have the black swan and the white swan. So you have the sovereign duality, almost like sort of divine duality, where it's not about like right and wrong, but it's more that these two things are living together, and that our job is to bring them together in harmony in this recollection. And so we have the black swan wing and we have the white swan wing, but really we are that embodiment of both of those. And so that's this beautiful invitation into the Aquarian age. It's kind of almost poetic how the stars are showing it that is what our next process after the tower moment. Then it's like, okay, now we get to give you an invitation into this beautiful balance in Aquarius.
Obviously, we have to speak about something like that on the full moon in Libra, where, with Chiron. But also it brings back to what we said earlier, that this like the entire universe is really just a balancing things out, from a state of imbalance to balance. And that happens through contrasting experiences. And with the other Robert's words, if we stop judging that, then, there's a lot more harmony inside of us and then also in the world, because we don't think that something is wrong in that sense, because it's all part of the game, all part of the play, all part of the how we learn, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's why I invite that quadrinity psychology, because we can see that like we know that we have yin and yang. So that's the two, but then we have the yin inside the yang and the yang inside the yin. So it's not just yin and yang, it's actually a quadrinity. So now all of a sudden, instead of just balancing in one plane, we're balancing in another plane.
Complex, yeah.
Right. And so this is how we navigate in the fourth dimension, is that we're so used to just weighing things up this way, but actually it's forwards and backwards as well. And so now we've got this ability to sort of move around and find these balances. And then that's what's going to open us up into our multidimensional selves. And when I say that, an easy way to think about time is that if I asked you to think of a childhood memory, the brain would find one and be like, okay, I've got one. And you could say, oh, could you picture this? Do you remember what you were doing? Do you remember what you were wearing, what you were tasting? Yeah, yeah. You're already time traveling.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I said earlier. We are in many different times
Mhm.
during the day. Like if
Yeah,
you just think of a memory, you're back there. Like it's happening right now in you.
yeah,
Even if
exactly.
it's not physically happening, it's happening. It's more dominant, and you feel then what you actually experience on a physical level, which is kind of sometimes a paradox because you're like, yeah, physically it's not happening, but I'm so much more present in the heartbreak from last week than I'm here in my present moment, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so this is why I say that when we speak about dimensions, often we've in the sort of self-help movement, it's kind of like you meditate and you go through these higher layers into the field, but your aura is the quantum field. And so these dimensions are happening in you all the time. And that's why I say, like, we just haven't recognized that the fourth dimension of time is our memories. And so when we're thinking about what we want to create in the future, right, and as what we want to manifest and how we want to move our work and everything else in our lives, we're now in in the future time. So we are already time travelers. It's just that we thought it was this idea that we would walk through some Stargate portal and enter into the past, but we're doing that inside the this amazing technology of our human body. So the fifth dimension is exactly the same. The sixth is exactly the same, and so you'll find all these layers of how to move into that as we progress.
I love it. I mean, I could go on forever with you about that. Even now, I feel like this is the whole thing. There's something really I want to just before we wrap up on yeah, talk about Orion, because I was sharing that the solar plexus was run by the moon, so run by our emotions basically. And I feel like there's a reversal that needs to happen where the solar plexus is run by the sun, by the original light, and by Orion's belt for some reason, because it's also where Orion's belt is on the Vitruvian Man. It's the solar plexus, right? So the original sun, which brings us back to what you shared about light and everything, the light DNA and like the lost octave. I really feel like it's that a different vibration of light that is being reintegrated into our DNA, which makes our aura or our field shine or radiate in a different way, which is also what opens up to a new perception of seeing and of understanding reality, of being more quantum, with everything that you shared about. And that's also where I feel like this precession of the equinox and the balancing out is happening with the transition in human design from the solar plexus and the spleen, that balancing out, because both systems in the body have been, I don't want to say hijacked or everything is part of the process, but definitely we have been influenced in the spleen, with the survival brain and all of these things. And so now moving into this more light consciousness, and there's something also why the Orion constellation, I think, needs to be reintegrated in the body. So I don't even know if that's a question, but I feel like there's something why I had these things and you sharing about the 14th zodiac that I wanted to kind of end on.
Yeah, no, I mean it's perfect actually because in the star codons, so with the lost octave, of course we're using 72 gates. We don't use a body graph or anything like this. So in the star codons, I wanted to create something, speaking about the central channel, I felt like the DNA was connected to the spine, right? The 33 vertebrae of the spine, this Christ number. So I managed to map out a sequence in the hexagrams, and this new sequence in the hexagrams allowed me to align it up the human spine. And when I did that, it allowed me to map in the hexagrams into the body, into our own spine. So that's revealing brand new connections of where hexagrams and what organs they're linked to, what their functions are linked to. So that's kind of like gives a new view that it's actually a lot about the throat chakra activation. So yeah, I know that sort of human design say about the solar plexus and everything else, but for me, it's it's more about the energy, the Shakti, now moving through and now coming into the throat chakra and purifying the throat chakra. And of course, that is the center of purification.
And it
And
is also Saraswati. It's
yeah,
like the voice, music, it's sound.
yeah, exactly. So, and that's all linked to the pyramids because the pyramids are the throat chakra. So it's more actually about that in my experience and what I'm sharing. But going back to the solar plexus and this whole the sun and the moon, well, the moon rules the sacral because that's the feminine waters, the womb. And then so then you got the solar plexus, the sun, and then the moon at the bottom. So those two, it's like the sun and the moon. And I think that as we are now, I share in, I've just shared it actually in the last session, is that it's less about the sun and moon and more about solar and lunar. And the
Yeah.
difference between those two is like there's emotions and then there's feeling. And they seem the same. To anybody else you speak about them, we use them interchangeably, but they are different. Feeling is in the moment and what's being present, and emotions are what has been in your field and what gets triggered. So the same thing with the sun and the moon, although that they're like the physical objects, but really the consciousness or the essence, the purity of them is solar and lunar. So I think that the transformation that's happening inside the body is trying to find the very essence of everything, the pure energy of it. So it's not sun and moon in here, but this is the solar energy of you. This is the lunar energy of you. And then that's when they're working together in harmony, that's like balancing the left and right hemispheres of the brain. It's like a pole shift at the solar plexus sacral area. And then that's where the central channel comes out to open the throat. And then that's where your speech and the balancing of the hemispheres, the balancing of light and dark, yin and yang, all of these things, it starts to manifest in your life. So that's kind of my experience of what the transitions that we're going through when it comes to the body, and I say the new findings that I've found in the spine with where the hexagrams are placed are absolutely fascinating. Like it
I
is
want to
just
know about that. Oh my gosh, I've loved like studying the spine has been basically my life's work. I
wow.
just love, wow, I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so to see it, like for example, how the old sort of I Ching used the hexagrams, they would always use that the heaven was above and that the earth hexagram was below. And so they had these sort of ideas of the Tai Chi, the energetic movements in the body would be the sort of heaven was above and earth was below. Well, what was interesting is that the pure yang is at the very base of the spine. So in the star codons, it's that's why I say it's about Shakti. Pure yang is actually Shakti. And so it is actually the first hexagram is actually at the base of the spine, exactly where the awakening of the Kundalini to move it back up the body. So as I started to find all these where the hexagrams were, it really, obviously in the body graph they said like it's in like the G center, right? But when now through this sequence, it's talking about like what is the energy of the Shakti? How does it work through the spine? And that's how I mapped out all of the hexagrams to the vertebrae. And then so I was really beautifully surprised that the first hexagram was exactly where you would expect Shakti to be in the base of the spine, coiled around 3.5 times. And I'm like, this is a whole new uh, energy, a whole new way of perceiving how these hexagrams are linked to our body, and then of course the amino acids and the all of that. It really is I call it the genetic answers of our universe. That's
I
what I
love
call the
that.
star codons because you can find every question you've ever wanted to know. It's like the AI of consciousness, and it tells you about new things in the body, the way in which we're being rewired into the Aquarian age, and what we need to learn. So yeah, like all these new stop codons and start codons, these other new gates and how it all links to different amino acids. And so there are 52 star codons. So in Ra's work, I think there was like 20 or 21 groupings of the amino acids, where in the maternal DNA and that there's over double, so there's 52 of them. So you think about like now that the genetic code is there's so much now that we can play with and know, that's just like, yeah, it's pretty mind blowing. So it's a whole year that we're taking people through it, 52 weeks. And even then, to be honest with you, we're covering so much so quickly. It could easily be a 3 year course. There is infinite amount of things in there. So that's what I'm currently doing every week, and finding new discoveries literally every week. And I'm sharing what I can on Instagram, and that's, all these other things, like with Robert with the King's Chamber, and marking all the star constellations in there, and all of these things. It's just, yeah, it's such a great time of creation and sharing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for when Uranus moves into Gemini. I feel like you will have even more lastings of information coming through for all of us. So thank you for all the work that you do. I will obviously link it all down below in the show notes, and I'm excited that tomorrow, literally out of the blue, in a way, your book finally arrives me. It's been in my field for so long, but it was hard to get into Dubai because of shipping. And then a friend of mine visits me from Germany, brings it on, and it literally happened in lightning speed. I'm like, okay, it's been delivered, everything, or in divine timing. I know one person in Dubai who has it, and she always said when she's traveling, she can give it to me. But we never ended up, we had a lot of conversations about it already. And she always said, like, you need to read this book, you need to read this book. I'm like, yes, I will, but I can't get my hands on it. She's like, it will find you when time is right. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry I can't give it to you because she's in a rabbit hole with it. So now I can.
So great. Just to say, like my moon is Gemini. So when you when Uranus goes into Gemini, it'll be in my moon sign. So it'll
Your
be like,
astrology, I'm gonna know actually, and human design if you know.
it's what, sorry?
Your astrology and human design?
What is it?
Yeah.
What is in what my gates are?
Yeah, your human design and your astrology, so your top three. So I think you're an Aries sun, right?
No, no, Pisces. I'm 22.
Oh, Pisces. Yeah, Pisces, Gemini moon. What's your rising?
Sagittarius, gate 9, hexagram 9. So the moon is 35. Yeah, so 22, the 35, and the 9. You could say. And so, yeah, so technically in human design, I'm a manifester. I'm a 4-1 manifester. And it's kind of interesting because obviously I didn't really know anything about human design when I was doing all of this. And on the Star Codons course, the person that I'm doing it with, that she's coming on board, is Bella, and she knows all about human design, and she's been with it for many years. And so, yeah, it's been interesting learning about from that view. And she's like, oh, you have the fixed cross. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what that is, but but yeah, she's like,
Very destiny for a manifestor. You need to inform the collective and then, exit. You've done your job.
yeah, that's basically what I feel like. I've come here, find some codes, give some things, go, here you go. This is all what I found, and now you journey through it and have fun, It's like a star map. It's like, here's a star map, and then go and have some fun. But what is your sun, or your three?
I'm Leo sun, Sagittarius rising, and Capricorn moon in
Ah,
Western.
what's the Leo? What's the Stargate? The hexagram.
7.
That's exactly where I wrote the book, The Lost Octave, under.
Yeah, I know. I'm August 10th. So I'm kind of like, yeah,
Yeah,
lion.
and that is the first of the higher octaves. So hexagram 7 in its next octave is 65. So that was the first one that I found, because when the transmission came, I was like feeling all of it, and I'm working it all out, and I'm like, where are we at the moment? And I'm like, oh, we're in 7, and I'm like, oh, well, this is the 65. Literally is like, so no wonder it found you in the end, because it's so base. And that's when Venus entered Leo in that synodic cycle. and so in 2023. And so yeah, that's this whole idea of the Leo Lioness Queen. But yeah, so 65, I think, yeah, I think if I was to anything, I would start with that one. And then opposite that in Aquarius is the 66. So that's exactly what we're going through at this time, is that from ancient Leo to into Aquarius. So yeah, kind of perfect why why this book will resonate with you.
And I'm also 7.6, which always means, in human design that you would move to the next one, because the six is the last line. So it's kind of like a maturation. So it makes sense that I have to move into the next, which would then be the 65. So I
Yeah,
get
so
it.
in the wheel you'll see it. So you have 65 actually comes first. That would be in the place of where seven would be. So and there's seven lines in the 65. So yeah, you'd probably be more like a yeah, you'd be like you'd literally be a 65 in the lost octave. So yeah, it's like and they're like, I say they in a way, although they're in that wheel, they really live in the next octave up. So
Yeah.
if you've got placements there, and of course then your super partner would be 66. So really it's about that, you could say that your destiny, your whole point of is be able to see the next layer of humanity, like what it's going into, and sort of those timelines of the past and the future. And that's the star law of the Grail, the Holy Grail. So, which is, you could say, well, what is the Holy Grail? Well, essentially, it was the symbol in the stars is the cup, the golden chalice. And so it's all about the search for the Holy Grail, whatever that means to you. It's that you're on this quest in your life, that your sun is shining to say, like, there is a quest in your life to search for this Holy Grail. And not only search for it, but to then be that Holy Grail. So there's this sort of beautiful sense of searching and, sort of Indiana Jones, like going through the temples and the searching around everywhere. But as you're integrating what you're searching for, you're becoming the living grail of the wisdom. And of course, it's connected to the womb, and it's connected to the maternal DNA and all of these.
A10, my north node, which would then be again the void and the maternal DNA and like everything we talked in the beginning, which is wild.
Yeah. So yeah. So and then so in Aquarius you have the silver chalice. So you have the silver chalice and the golden grail. And so this would be a beautiful thing to finish on, actually, as a visual, is that in the wheel, so you have the silver chalice up here, and then you have the golden grail here, and the river is in between. And so as we turn the wheel, as we go round the year, they're pouring from one to another, right? So as it continues around and around, they're forever turning it. And that's the temperance card in the tarot. We have the two chalices and pouring the alchemy to create the alchemical gold. And so that is this whole motion of what us as humanity is going through, is that we are alchemizing the silver and the gold to make the philosopher's stone. And the philosopher's stone is the love of Sophia, right? So that's what philosopher means, is the love of Sophia. So as we're alchemizing between the silver and the gold, the male and female, however you want to describe it, that is mixing the alchemical gold of eternal life, of our immortality. And so that is exactly the star story of your natal chart.
Wild. I mean, yeah, through human design. I mean, I made some connections and dots and everything, but to just see gate 7 leadership support and like all the things, I'm like, yeah, I know I'm meant to like guide people. I'm a projector, guide people also through my voice because I'm a self-projected projector. So okay, I get it, but something is missing because the things that I'm interested in, it's more like going into these deep rabbit holes and like uncovering the mysteries of the universe and things like that, through sound, through vibration, through like the fabric of DNA and stuff. And I'm like, how, it doesn't do I'm meant to be a scientist or teach or whatever, I don't know, like I'm just following the breadcrumbs at this point, but it's exciting.
Just to say that the word for the in the quadrinity, the word for the seven, or the 65 is omnipotence, right? So that's really the higher octave of Leo is about omnipotence. Right? So this like all knowing, this all potent energy. And so as you raise the vibration, then yeah, you're connecting into all of these fields where it's like I'm interested in this and that and all of the and I'm connecting all of them. And so yeah, it's that is really what the highest essence of Leo is about, is the full illumination of the sun and all of those solar codes linking into the Aquarian age. So yeah, a beautiful, what an amazing placement to have. It's so perfect for the Lost Octave.
Yes, definitely. I'm excited now. Now I'm even more excited to dive into the book with the connection to my birthday, and I will literally tomorrow probably spend all day reading 65
Yeah.
and only go back to you with all the epiphanies that I have or whatever. Yeah, it was so good to talk to you, and hopefully we will have another conversation at some point, because I feel like this year is going to be a big one for all of us, and we need to talk about all the things that we come up with. I think it's so important. So you are running the course. Is it something that is closed, or is it like everyone can join whenever they want? Because you mentioned it's like for a year, or does it matter when you join?
Yeah, so we opened it in November and we kept it open. And but yeah, now that if you want to do the course, then there's I mean we've already done like maybe I mean you could probably catch it. It's like 40 hours worth of like all going through all of this. And but yes, you can join now if you wish to. You can just see it on the website. There's introductory videos that you can watch that explains about everything that we cover and everything. But yeah, you can join at any time and come into it. You're more than welcome. It's a beautiful group, about 52 people, funnily enough, for 52 star codons.
About 52, of course.
And yeah, it's a beautiful community, and new people have joined, and so yeah, it's something that you can do. You can join the calls every week, or you can do your own self study, however you want to do it, and you can watch all the back videos that we've done. And so yeah, you'll be filling up notebooks, like real absolute notebooks worth. It's just tremendous, and I'm so pleased that I have the opportunity to share this kind of out there, and to take people through this, and revealing also some of the secrets that haven't been found in the maternal DNA and the hexagrams. And it's just yeah, it's a beautiful adventure. So yeah, star codons if you want to come. And then if you want to find out more about the star law, then obviously that's the Lost Octave book. And yeah, I try and put out as much content on social media and on the website to try and navigate some of these new terms and this new wave. But I feel adding in the star law into that rave mandala, into the hexagrams, it's really, for me, it really brings it into life. It's not just about necessarily degrees and what the hexagram means. It's like, what is this happening in the stars? And of course, the whole thing's about astrology. And so we can see that all of the deacons, all of the stars, all constellations are there. Now we can tune into those as a new facet. And as I say, that's where all of our mysteries and myths and stories come from. So that's the easiest way we can learn, is by listening to stories. Everybody loves a great story. So if you know the star law, you're literally just reading the stories of your imprint. And I'll just end with that. I recently just shared that the constellations are our genetic code. And that I found that as you look down the microscope and you see how all of the genetic code is formed, you actually see the direct replica on the night sky. And so for all this time, we've been looking at the stars as things out there, and yet all the stars are literally in here. So
I
we are,
always said that when I explain astrology, because I mean, I don't know, I just always said it without having obviously scientific proof. But I always said, the reason why some transits affect you that much and others don't is because it's literally like the planet that is being activated, triggering your cells, your DNA, like shaking something inside of you up. And that's why sometimes the transits affect one person more than the other, because it's coded in your cells and it literally makes you vibrate a certain way. It shakes you or it doesn't shake you.
yeah. Absolutely. And when those planets, which is like the astro weather, when those
Mhm.
planets move into that alignment of the star energy that's beaming to you, it's amplified through the planet with its own energy onto it. And then that, like you said, that's triggering, awakening a dormant code within you or switching on an amino acid within, literally within your body. But yeah, it was so beautiful to, I'm now finding the exact amino acids that are connected to the exact constellation. So for the first time, it now linking the fact that what you are looking out at the night sky is literally the very fabric of your own body. How beautiful.
Again, like we can probably go on a tangent with everything, but I need to add that because what I did was I had this download also working with gene keys and astrology and that understanding of astrology. Like it's really like a cellular activation that happens through the transit. And then I was going into these rabbit holes of like, well, then it must also mean that when we supplement, for example, with a specific amino acid, let's just say you have your Saturn return and you know your Saturn is in a specific gate that has a specific amino acid attached to it. What if you supplemented amino acid and it helps you with the transit? That it's, you know, supporting your system to reboot, to rebuild, to not be shaken up so much. That was kind of like my idea. I haven't done it like religiously. I don't have proof of it, but I think that could be a good way to help us move through these shifts in a more easier way because it's really, you know, if you think about it, it's programmed in yourself, the astrology, also time programmed for a reason to help you or to know, like, you know, from a level of before you came here, during these specific moments in your life, XYZ is being activated. So I also believe that we have the remedy or the support or the healing tools to support that. So we are not like, oh my gosh, everything is just happening to me. So if you go deeper into that research, with the amino acids, it might be nice to add that or to maybe you get some insights on that because I'm a little alchemist at heart, so I always
Yeah,
like to do.
well, yeah, the alchemy of the silver and the gold. But yeah, I mean, at the moment, I would say in my own processes that I'm finding the foods that contain the amino acids to try and help support like the shifts. And so my diet's changed a lot throughout this whole process. And then figuring out like you're saying, instead of yeah, I mean, you could supplement them, or for me at the moment, I'm doing it more organically with food. So if I know there's more tryptophan in a certain food, then I'm eating that in connection to it all. So I definitely think this holistic way of health and management of all of these energies is coming through. And then as I shared, that I've connected all the music and the frequencies. So again, anybody that wants to, you know, they can listen to their own birth chart by looking in the book at the back, and you'll see the exact frequency that resonates with that hexagram. So yeah, plenty of ways um, to work with it.
1 second, and just didn't want that to be like, so yeah, you were sharing about your own like research with that as well, but it would definitely, I think, be nice to have like a study experiment on that also because of, you know, that entire shift with, yeah, the North Node in Pisces and like the Virgo Pisces elements of like we need new remedies also for our cellular structure, for our health and the coherence of our system, specifically because what I always share is that with this new quantum understanding, traditional medicine won't help the new human that we are building with this entire quantum and new DNA and all of that. There will be specific things that we don't have an answer for, but maybe going back to something that or like going into something that you uncover with the DNA, with the amino acids, with the bonding structures of maybe even a new formation of DNA could be, you know, a new way of going into even health.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much, I keep my finger on the pulse of like what's happening in the new genetic code, because obviously that then I can then convert that into the astrology and the hexagrams and things like that. And yeah, this balancing of the maternal DNA is giving a lot more clues. And it's interesting because I would say the maternal DNA, it's the same in you that it was in your mother, in your grandmother, in your great grandmother, all the way back to when your first genetic line originated. It hasn't changed. So the nuclear DNA changes with the influence of your parents. So that's the imprinting that is in you. But the maternal DNA is unspoiled. It's the origin of the very essence of your genetic line. And that's why I'm able to track back to first Eve in this whole journey of the star codons. So working with that and letting that, the natural rhythms of the unspoiled part of the DNA, you could say, or the origin of our DNA, I think, yeah, it's just unveiling new ways. And I'd love to develop this more into sort of a homeopathic idea of foods, remedies, and things. And I think it will grow and grow. And but yeah, it's a journey. It's blossoming piece by piece.
And you know, as with everything, it's being revealed to us when humanity needs it and is ready.
Mhm.
And you know, similar to what you shared earlier, and you being a manifestor, and for me too, it's like I've had so many downloads that only now kind of make sense or click because we are a little bit ahead. You know, that's also part of our nature to be a little bit ahead, to see the future or to see what's needed, but you know, we have to take our time and pace ourselves in a way.
Yeah, I wish I could. It's just been wild the last 2 years, as you probably know. But yeah, I've always found there's a really interesting resonance between projectors and manifestors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've never sort of, but the more that I've sort of obviously connected into the field of people that are into human design and things like that, that I noticed that there's a resonance there, which is, yeah, I don't know if I can even explain it, but it feels like you see things, you're on the same page. You may see things different and bring in different parts, but it's like you have an unspoken like knowledge of something, like an agreement in somewhere. And so then when you share and you speak about it, it's like, oh yeah, this is really what's alive in the moment and what needs to happen for, like you're saying, the future of helping the collective. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing to see. And yeah, thank you so much for this and today, and for I'm looking forward to hearing about your insights through the book. And yeah, it's really great to be getting out there to more people and to share and to have great conversations like this where we can dive a bit deeper into the sort of technical parts of all of this. And yeah, super grateful to be with you.
Yeah, because I mean, it can be overwhelming. Even me, you know, I like rabbit holes and stuff, but when I saw your material, I'm like, where do I start? It's so much, you know, and you know, that's yeah. Then I didn't start, and then it came, you know, usually how it happens, then it comes into your field over and over again, and then I'm like, okay, divine, I'm listening, you know, I'm going into it. Okay, another rabbit hole you put me in. I'm down, you know. All right, it's literally delivered to my doorstep. Like, how can I say no, you know? And the author itself speaks to you, like, can you please answer the call? I'm like, okay, I will, you know, so I'm excited to see where it leads me and where it leads us, and obviously keep you posted. Thank you so much for your time. I'm pretty sure we will be back with another rabbit hole soon.
Yeah,
And yeah, definitely we'll link everything and also put it on YouTube, obviously the podcast and some snippets on Instagram so we can all find the highlights everywhere, and invite everyone to go into rabbit holes themselves and share with us what you uncover and the epiphanies and downloads and synchronicities that pop up afterwards. It's always fascinating. So thank you, Robert, and I hope that you are back very, very soon.